Welcome to the Wheeler Centre, everybody. How are you feeling? Yes, I'm feeling very excited as well. I've had the excitement and the privilege of actually having had breakfast with our guest today. And before I introduce you to our guest, just a little bit about who I am. For those of you who may not know, my name is Cyndi Darnell. I am a sex and relationship therapist based in Melbourne and have been very grateful to have worked with the Wheeler Centre over the last couple of years. And I'm very excited about being here today with author and speaker Joan Price. Joan Price calls herself an advocate for ageless sexuality. She's been called other things by the media, such as a senior sexpert, the beautiful face of senior sex, and also her favourite, the wrinkly sex kitten. For 15 years, Joan was a widely published health and fitness writer, and then, at 57, after decades of single life, she fell deeply in love with artist Robert Rice, who was then 64. Their passion, in contrast to society's view of older people as sexless, led Joan at age 61 to write Better Than I Ever Expected, Straight Talk About Sex After 60, to celebrate the delights of older life sexuality. Robert and Joan married after 5 years together and then had 2 more years together before Robert died of cancer in 2008. His last request to Joan was, "Promise me you'll keep doing this work." Her subsequent work, the successful Naked at Our Age, was released in 2011, and the demand for more information about senior sex led Joan to write The Ultimate Guide to Sex After 50, which is available today, on how to maintain or regain a spicy and satisfying sex life. Please, everybody, put your hands together for Joan Price.
Thank you. Thank you. How wonderful that this topic is drawing so many people. Thank you.
Isn't it fabulous?
Uh-huh.
So, Joan, welcome to Australia. You've been here since Sunday.
Since Sunday.
And how have you found it so far?
I love this place. Everyone is treating me so well. It's a beautiful city. And I'm just enjoying everything I've been doing here. Thank you for making me feel so welcome.
We're very excited to have you here, and I'm very excited to be presenting with you today. And so for folk in the audience who may not be familiar with you and your work, how would you describe your work in your own words?
In my own words, I make a lot of noise about senior sex. I write about it, I talk about it, I give workshops. To me, it is a mission to normalize, to celebrate older age sexuality. And when there are problems that come up that prevent people from enjoying their own sexual expression, then I try to help them find the answers so that they can, because I firmly believe that for every problem, there is a solution. You need the right information, you need some creativity, and you sure need a sense of humor, because if you can't laugh at sex at our age, when can you laugh at
it? Exactly. And I noticed when I was reading The Ultimate Guide to Sex After 50, which I need to just... as I was reading The Ultimate Guide to Sex After 50, what I really picked up, Joan, was a revolutionary spirit in the way that you write.
Thank you.
And something that it hadn't occurred to me when you said it was your generation who were responsible for, birthing the anti-war movement, for birthing the women's rights movement, and even the beginnings of the queer rights movement.
Yes, and we discovered sex too.
Did you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, absolutely, because that was the big sexual revolution.
Of course.
That was us.
Of course that was, indeed. So then why is it, do you think, that a lot of senior folk these days tend to just give up on sex when they've had such a cultural history of being revolutionaries? What happens for seniors? I know.
Well, I think there are 2 things going on. One is that our society has what I call the ick factor, which is, ew, wrinkly people having sex, that's disgusting. And that permeates our society. That permeates certainly the United States, and I see it here too. But the other thing that happens is that we as a generation have somehow internalized that, that sex is for the young, gorgeous hard bodies. I mean, that's all we see on television. That's all we see in the magazines. That's all we see in fashion. Everywhere everyone is trying to market to using sex, and it's never about us. We're the invisible generation. And somehow we seem to internalize that, oh, if things aren't working the way they used to work, which is going to happen, then that means we've aged out of sex. And I want to say we don't age out of sexuality. There is no expiration date on our sexual capacity.
So when you say people may have, or seniors may have internalized some of that, what are some of the telltale signs that might be an indication of that? What might be some of the things that would be an example of what you're talking about?
Women embarrassed about their bodies. Because, for example, many, many women say to me, particularly those who are newly single, perhaps, after death of a spouse or divorce or being dumped, and they'll say, I really want to have sex again, but I don't want anyone to see me naked. My body isn't what it it isn't what it used to be, but it is still capable of great pleasure. And that's what we need to be focusing on, the wonderful joys we can get from these aging bodies, not whether they look like they're 20 anymore. You give it up. They don't look like they're 20 anymore, so what?
And so it sounds like your message is really about shifting the emphasis away from what we look like and what we do to how it feels?
How it feels and what it is we're trying to express. You see, one thing, another part of why we may give up on sex is we don't have that hormonal rush that we had before. We don't have the testosterone, the estrogen that was saying to us, yes, gotta have sex, propelling us. And when that recedes, what do we have left? A heck of a lot. We have the need for touch, the need for intimacy, the pleasure, all the great health reasons. I have in my book 33 health reasons to have orgasms. Did you know that 33 health reasons? Yeah, who knew? I'm just doing what the doctor ordered.
33 reasons in here, folks. And one of the other messages that I picked up from reading this, which is seriously fabulous, by the way, is that the population over 50 is the largest in history, and that folks over 50 are healthier than they've ever been. They're more aware, they're more active. So given that the population is so robust, is so healthy, is so active, why do you think that sex for seniors is still such a taboo topic?
Well, first let me say that although I was talking about how we internalize that message, the ick factor, I want to also say that there are huge numbers of seniors who are having robust, fabulous sex. You pass them in the grocery line, you see them on the tram. You have no idea what they're doing behind closed doors. No idea. So don't make assumptions, right? But the other part of that is that if we are not seeing ourselves as sexual beings reflected in the media, in society, and younger people are going, ew, ick, and they're telling these old geezer jokes and little old lady and dirty old man, they're laughing at us. The stereotypes. So what we need to do is just say, hey, my sexuality is important to me. I celebrate what my body can do for me. I celebrate the ways I can give and receive pleasure. And to not think so much about what society is saying we ought to or should not to do.
Great. And in terms of, like, if we're talking about things that we should and shouldn't do, let's swing the conversation around to practical tips, because I think for a lot of folks, we can sort of wax lyrically about sex and it's good for us and it's healthy, and like, yeah, we know that. But for folks who may be intimidated by that process, or even things around, as you're saying, bodies don't necessarily work the same way that they do when we're in our 20s. What are some do you think are the most wonderful and practical things that folk could do starting from today to reinvigorate their sex life?
I can do that. You want some tips? Okay. So here's what we're combating. The lack of hormones, the sluggish blood flow. Used to be that blood would just rush to the genitals. And now it takes a heck of a lot to get them going in that direction. Even though it seems like gravity should pull them there, but no. So here are some tips that will increase blood flow to the genitals. And they're free. All right. Tip number 1, exercise before sex.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. See, think about it. When you exercise, what happens? Increases blood flow. Everything, goes to the brain, goes to the muscles. You're aware of that. But did you know it also goes to the genitals? Yes, it does. Mm-hmm. Another thing is, have sex before a meal, not after.
Yeah.
Again, blood flow. It's not going to go to the genitals if it's going to the digestive system. Mm-hmm. So eat before a meal or instead of a meal. Why not? Let me see. Another part to that is to what I call track the tingle. We may feel we're not in the mood for sex anymore, or we're not responding well. Our arousal is more difficult. Orgasms take way too long if they happen at all. What do we do? Erections are undependable. We need so much more time. So take more time, take much more time for sex. Let an hour be a quickie. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying you're having intercourse for an hour. Mm. I'm saying that all of the things you do to arouse yourself, to arouse each other, let that happen slowly. Now, the track the tingle thing, though, is when you actually schedule that hour or two. An hour is a quickie and 2 hours is just right. You schedule it at the time that you feel most sexually responsive. How do you know when that is? Take a couple of days and just pay attention to what time of day you start to feel a little, I wouldn't mind if I could just clear the rest of my life out and do it right now, I think I could be really responsive. If you're thinking about it, and if you're thinking, now when is that? Is it right after I get up? Is it after a cup of coffee and a good poop? Is it maybe in the mid-afternoon? It's probably not after dinner, right? It's not. So you're going to schedule sex. That's another thing. Schedule it for the time where the tingle is happening. You're feeling tingly. You're feeling sexually responsive. Whether you are partnered or solo, and I want to say sex isn't just for the partnered. Mm-hmm. Solo sex is real sex. Mm. That's a big message.
Yeah. And I think, I know from the work that you do and certainly what I've read, you talk a lot about sex toys. Is that something we can talk about now?
Oh, I love to talk about sex toys.
So, and I think because it's a real reality for folks, regardless of age, and then particularly around age, that a lot of senior folks are unpartnered for a variety of reasons. Yes. And thank goodness we live in an era where there are abundant sex toys.
Yes.
What would you say would be some of the best for folk of different genders?
Well, let me tell you how I evaluate them. But first, let me just take a little picky issue with something you said.
Okay.
It's not just for when we're single, because sex toys help to increase the speed of our arousal. Yeah. So let's say we are partnered. We're lucky enough to be partnered, and we have a partner who is doing those things that really turn us on. But that partner has wrist arthritis and can't keep going, or has, let's say, knee problems or hip problems, and it's just darn painful to stay in our favorite position for long enough to make that. So a good sex toy can increase the speed of arousal, can bring us closer to orgasm faster, and in many cases, a well-chosen, well-placed sex toy can be the difference between orgasm and no orgasm. Mm-hmm. It's sometimes that simple.
Yeah.
So I have a very interesting part of the work I do. I review sex toys from a senior perspective.
Really?
Thank you. Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
So what do I mean? Ask me what I mean by a senior perspective.
What do you mean by a senior perspective,
I'm
Joan?
glad you asked that, Cyndi. Here's the thing. Younger people, they may have their favorite sex toys, but pretty much there's an enormous number of them that will work. For us, our needs can be very specialized. For example, when I review sex toys from a senior perspective, I'm looking at them from these criteria. 1, is it strong enough? We need extra sensation. What the nice, gentle, tickly thing is just going to be annoying. Now, I can't generalize for everyone, but for many of us, we need a lot of extra sensation. We need a toy that will keep going for as long as we need it without, running out of charge or overheating or catching on fire.
That's a good point. So
what more? There's more.
Oh, okay.
There's more. I'm sorry.
Carry on.
It would be, okay, we want the controls to be easy to use with lubed fingers. You know, otherwise it's, whoops, whoa, and it's clattering across the floor. Come on. We would like to be able to tell what the controls say without putting on our reading glasses, because that can be, when we think we're hitting the plus sign and we actually turn it off, that is a buzzkill. A real buzzkill.
Yes.
More than that, we need them to be made of body-safe materials. Now, this is something you may not realize, that many are not. Some, now I don't know about in Australia, but there are sex toys in the United States, mainly imported from China, that contain ingredients, carcinogenic ingredients, that are illegal in baby toys, illegal in dog toys, but not illegal in sex toys that we're supposed to put in our vaginas.
Yeah.
No. Our aging vaginas have thinner skin. The tissues have thinned. So it is very easy to get access to our bloodstream, because it's very easy just to have a little minute tear or lesion, and we may not even be aware that happened. We haven't even been doing anything terribly rough, but somehow just we didn't use enough lube, or we went a little longer than is comfortable, or we used a toy or a person that maybe was a little bit girthy for us. And we may not realize until later we feel the burning a little bit. But let's say we were using a toy that was leaching out chemicals that are unhealthy for us. Where are those chemicals going?
Exactly.
To our
Straight into the
bloodstream.
blood.
So we have to really be careful about that. Well, that's the start of my list.
And so, Joan, I know in many ways, you know, you're very honest about your relationship with Robert and the impact that his passing had on you.
Yeah.
And this is certainly something that affects a lot of folk. Is that, could you elaborate more on how you have processed that, and then how that has affected you in moving forward in terms of considering dating again?
Oh, yeah. I imagine I speak for many of us who have experienced loss, that when we lose a partner that we love, it's a visceral thing. It's physical. I felt for the first year that I was vomiting tears. Do you know what I mean? I could not stop crying. I cried in public. I cried in private. I cried, at the Department of Motor Vehicles when I was changing ownership of Robert's car to mine, and they said, "Can you prove he's dead?" Oh. Well, I knew to expect that because I did have the death certificate, but just to have somebody, this is my day job, I get paid very little, but can you prove your husband died? Because we can't. And I'm just bursting into tears. Yeah, I can prove he died. Everything in me is proving he died. There were times when I did not know how I could ever emerge from the grief. And I know we don't really could I just see hands of people who've experienced loss of a loved one like that? Okay. We don't get over grief. We just sort of cycle through it. It gets a little better and a little bit worse, and a little better and a little bit worse. And over time, especially if we get grief counseling, it would have taken me way longer without grief counseling. We get to the point where a little bit better times, outnumber the worst times. And we go, oh. And then I remember at one point, I had a dream that I was sexually aroused by a man, and I didn't know this, I didn't recognize this man really, and he wasn't doing anything sexual. We were just walking arm in arm, and he was holding me close, and sometimes he'd pull me in for a hug, and I'd feel that he was aroused, and I was getting aroused. And then I woke up, and I sat up in bed, and I said, I'm alive. Oh. It was this realization that we are truly resilient beings, and we have a life force within us that says to heal. It will heal us. Mm-hmm. And I know when people said it'll get better with time, I said, yeah. But now I'm telling people that. Now I'm talking to people who have lost loved ones more recently. I'm saying it will get better. There were some things I did to help. One of the things I did, and this has nothing to do with sex, but it was an important realization. Being a writer, I wanted to write about Robert, but I kept getting stopped because I wanted to write about my grief, but I also wanted to write about the good things. I didn't want it all to be, I want to write about Robert, I'm going to cry now. So I started 2 separate journals, the memory journal and the grief journal. And I would write in one or the other, or write in one and then write in the other. And it was so helpful to me, and I've never read about that anywhere else, that strategy, because then when I wanted to read about Robert, and I didn't want to read the grief, I wanted to read about the wonderful loving memories, I'd just pick up the memory journal, and I could open it anywhere, and it was so beautiful. I really recommend that. I don't think you have to be a writer to get a lot out of that, just because we have these things in us, and if we don't express them, they just stay there. They just stay there, and they fester and gurgle around.
And it's like that thing with, in the same way that sex, and sex for seniors especially, as a taboo topic, and talking about death is a taboo topic, that all of these things, it's very much true that if we keep it inside us, it tends to fester. And that expression that you're advocating, expression of sexuality, expression of emotion, no matter what it is fundamental to feeling
that's absolutely
alive.
Right. And then how this comes back to sex is there was a time somewhere in that blur of the first year or two where I knew, because I know all the health reasons for being sexually active, I knew I should at least be having solo sex, and I just was so sad I wasn't interested. And I knew it was important, and so I said to my grief counselor, I know I should be pleasuring myself, but I don't even know if it would work. And she said, such a wise woman, she said, if you have a vibrator, it'll work. I said, do I have a vibrator? Vibrators. I have a house full of... And she was right. She was right. So I went on this first journey of bringing my sex life back that way, just solo. Yeah. And I knew at some point I needed to date. I wanted the companionship of men.
And so if we talk about dating now, and because that's another thing I think for some folk that's a bit of a hurdle about not so much when can I start dating, but how to go about it. What would be a couple of tips that you would have about dating as a senior person?
Sure. Okay. Switching to dating as a senior person, which I now do quite well.
I can't imagine why that wouldn't be the case.
Well, I mean, in that I find it fun now. I'm no longer sad about that. Because at first when I started, I would think, okay, I'm ready to date. I wasn't. And I'd have a date and just go home and cry and say, I'm not going to do that for another 6 months. And then now it's fun. And in fact, it's so much fun to try to reinvent how to date at our age that I do a workshop called How the Heck Do I Date at This Age? Doesn't that sound like fun? Wouldn't you like me to come back and do that for you? How the heck do I date at this age? Because it's not like younger. It's not that we go to class and it's full of people who are available and interested. It's not that we have our church groups or whatever other social groups we had as young people. We can endlessly walk the streets of Melbourne and never know whether someone we see is available or interested, and never meet anyone that way. And if we stay home, which we're tempted to do, unless it's the delivery guy that we're interested in, nothing happens there. The people are on online dating. That's where they are. Yeah. That's what we need to do if we're going to meet people. Now, being in a big city like this, you probably have many more options than I do in a rural area of California. But even so, how does somebody, if you think about it, there's the perfect person or persons looking for you. How is that person going to find you?
Exactly.
Not going to the library.
Yeah. And it was that thing that we were talking about before when we met, about the criteria may have shifted, that it may not be that you're necessarily looking for the big love of your life. You're looking for companionship.
That's right. Companionship. Some are looking for companionship without sex. Some are looking for companionship with full-on sex. Some are looking for sex that doesn't involve penetration. And there are some of any gender who are looking for that. I mean, there are some that would penetrate and don't have reliable penetration and would rather not have to have that performance anxiety, would rather have a relationship where that was not expected or demanded, or that where the person might feel, well, I failed because I can't penetrate. Yeah. And there may be people who say, I don't want to receive penetration, it's too painful. And there are ways to deal with vaginal pain. I'm not saying that if there's vaginal pain, it means give up on sex. But until you learn about what to do about that, get it diagnosed, get treatment, figure out. But meanwhile, that doesn't mean we can't be having sexual pleasure. And
so it sounds like it's what your message here is. It's really about reframing what our idea of sex is, that it might not resemble what we thought sex was at a different time in our lives.
Absolutely.
But we are still capable of erotic pleasure.
That's right. And how do you ask? I mean, you can't put in your profile, can you? I mean, don't say you lay it all out on your profile. But somehow we need to know how to have that conversation. We also, of course, need that conversation about safer sex. Yes. Just because we can't get pregnant anymore doesn't mean that we don't need to use barrier protection. We do. This, I find, is a very hard message.
And the statistics around that are showing that it is folks of my generation, the X's and the boomers, who are often most at risk because our sex education was not necessarily especially comprehensive, and that we forget that we're not immune.
Right. Well, we never realized it.
And we never realized it.
And we don't know how to talk about it. And that's part of the workshop that I do with How the Heck Do I Date at This Age is, how do you have the safer sex conversation? When do you bring it up? How do you bring it up?
Exactly.
What do you say when someone says, for example, oh, I can't keep an erection if we do that?
And all of that information's in your book.
It's all in there. The conversations, the what to say when someone does. Yes, I know.
And
it's
because,
all in there.
yeah, I mean, we are so time limited here, and I'm mindful of the time now that we are going to open it up to the floor. And we've got a couple of folk with microphones on either side. So before I continue to speak with Joan, are there any questions that you would like to ask Joan?
Are you getting some useful things already? Oh, good. Okay.
Thanks very much for the talk, really enjoying it.
Thank
I'm
you.
finding in my cohort of friends a lot of difficulties are coming from mismatched desires with partners that have been together for a long time. One's more interested now than the other, but they don't want to go outside the marriage necessarily. Can you address that, please?
Okay, mismatched desire is definitely very prevalent. All the way from the extremes, which is one person says, I'm done with sex, and so you have to be done with it too. And the other one going, wait, I'm not done. To the just, I'd like to do it once a month, and the other one says, I'd like to do it every other day. So there are all these different possibilities of this working out. Certainly the first thing is to talk about it. We don't know how to talk about sex with our partners. It's understandable because we never had to. You know, when the hormones were raising, we just, gave into them, and it was great. And we just said lovey-dovey things, and it was all perfect. And now, both because we are maybe in relationships that are long-term and we don't have that spice of the newness, or it could be just that we are mismatched. So there are two things to do. One is first to get a medical workup and see whether the lack of desire is due to a medical cause. This is hugely important, and this is something that people don't do, because they think, oh yeah, right, telling my doctor that I'm no longer interested in sex or that I'm having erectile problems and therefore don't want to be put on the spot for sex, that's like announcing it at my class reunion if I were to tell it. And they don't want to do it. But it's so important because sometimes what's happening, whether it's lack of desire or whether it's really inability to be aroused, there could be a medical cause. It could be heart disease. It could be diabetes. It could be any number of conditions. And that works not only for penis, it works for clitoris too. If the clitoris isn't working, it's the same thing as the penis not working. So we need to first get a medical workup, and often the doctors won't know. They'll give you a quick, well, use more lube, or use, here's a prescription for Viagra. You want to say, wait, don't treat it when you don't know what the cause is. Let's find out the cause. And we need to insist on that. I teach audiences to say, if you can't help me, please refer me to someone who can. We need to be able to say that. We need to be able to say, my sexuality is important to me, and if you can't help me figure out why I'm having these problems with desire, with orgasm, with arousal, refer me to someone who can, or with pain. Now, the other thing that's happening is that often we will just plain get to the point where one of us is much more desirous than the other. If there are ways to handle that, one is to have a conversation about opening up the marriage, saying, could you give me a hall pass? And this could be because maybe one person has developed into maybe wanting more kink than the other one. I mean, we change in many, many ways.
The sexuality is such an evolutionary thing.
Such an evolutionary
How we are
thing.
in our 20s is going to be different to our 30s, 40s,
absolutely.
50s.
So we might want to have that conversation. Is there a way that it would be all right with you if you gave me a hall pass? Is that a familiar expression here? Okay. To do what I need to do sometimes. It might be just opening up the marriage altogether.
And in my work as a sex and relationship therapist, I'm seeing more and more of that discussion happening.
And the real important thing, besides getting the medical workup, is to see a sex therapist who can help you sort out what's going on. What's going on in your desires. Maybe there's something in the relationship that needs working out. It doesn't have to do with sex at all, but it impacts sex.
Often it's not medical, sometimes it is, and I agree 100%. We do need a medical approach and also an emotional/cognitive approach. Can be really
I have a
helpful.
lot more in the book, and I know we're hurting for time, but there's much more on that. Yeah. There was a question here. No? Oh, is there a question anywhere else? I want to say something about desire while you're thinking of your question then. I'm often asked, and this is generally from women who say, I'm not in the mood anymore. I'm never in the mood anymore. If I go ahead and have sex, I enjoy it. But I don't miss it if I don't. What do I do? Okay, here's something going on. If we don't have the desire, the hormone-fueled desire, and we're not in the mood, and yet we're either in a good relationship, a good, healthy, loving relationship, or we are happy with our sex toys when we actually get going, we should just do it. Just do it. If we let ourselves get physiologically aroused, the mood will follow instead of the other way around.
And I think that's something that's definitely true, that a lot of us have been led to believe that desire has to come before arousal. So desire being the cognitive and emotional component, and arousal being the physical component. And interestingly, when we give ourselves over to the physical rather
Yeah.
than waiting to get in the mood, sometimes by just putting that effort in and going and masturbating and using sex toys and doing different things like that, that can actually facilitate desire, even though in the beginning we are thinking, maybe I'm not so in the mood.
Yeah.
But after a good 20 minutes, half an hour, I'm like,
go,
oh,
why don't I do
wow,
this
there's
more
the
often?
mood.
Right, why aren't we doing this more often?
Absolutely.
And the other thing that happens is the more we do it, the more we want to do it.
Yes.
So the more orgasms we have, the easier it is to achieve orgasm, the easier it is to be aroused, and our bodies then start expecting it and makes it much easier. So just do it, just do it. You have our permission to just do it.
That's a fabulous take-home message. Are there any other questions? I've got a few more I could ask, but I'm really interested to hear what you have to ask Joan.
There's a big company hoping to make a lot of money out of a little pink pill to address the desire problem. What do you think of that?
How long have we got? Okay. There are many, many, many reasons that women stop feeling desire. Most of those reasons aren't treatable with a pill. Even if our particular reason is treatable with a pill, this pill isn't the one. First of all, it has to be taken every day, not just when we want to have sex. It's not
It's not like
women's
Viagra.
It's not. We have to be taking it every day. It will make us fall down or have automobile accidents. We can't drink alcohol and use it. That means no more alcohol for the rest of your life if you're using this. And we don't really know all the side effects. We know those side effects that you can pass out and crash if you're driving. We know those. You know, the risks outweigh the benefits. And when they did the studies, wasn't it that they took people who before the pill were having 2 sexual events a month, and when they took the pill, they were having 3 instead of 4? Really? Is that worth all that? This isn't the magic pill. I'm sorry, it isn't. But you know, we don't need one. We don't want to medicalize what is normal. There may be something abnormal going on, and just taking a pill will prevent us from finding out what it is. If it is, for example, that a medical condition is causing our lack of desire, or our medications, or an interaction of our medications, or the timing of our medications. Did you know that sometimes you can go to your pharmacist and say, here's what I'm taking, here's when I'm taking it, I'm not feeling sexy and I want to be sexy at 10 in the morning, what do I do? Oh, well, switch that pill from 8 o'clock to 11. Oh, really? It sometimes can be that simple, but you've got to not be shy about asking for help. And when the people don't know the answer, you say, refer me to someone who knows it.
So it really sounds like, Joan, I mean, the thread in everything that you've said through our discussion this afternoon has really been around putting yourself in a position where you're doing some sort of self-inquiry and you're asking yourself, what do I want? What's important to me? And then strategizing, working out ways of either getting the information that you need if you don't have it, or if you do have it, then communicating that to those who need to know, be it lovers, partners, medical professionals, that sort of thing.
I didn't even need to write a 400-page book. There it is in one paragraph. Oh my gosh, I should have consulted you. No, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's exactly right.
And so before we sort of wrap up the session today, what would be your kind of your ultimate bottom line message, your ultimate take home around sex for seniors, and you know, the very thing that motivates you and that is at the source of your passion and your enthusiasm for this topic? And it's just so lovely to meet somebody who shares my enthusiasm for sex and pleasure and all of those delicious things, and is able to speak about it for a community who really are often silenced in this. And I am so thrilled and honoured to have met you and had the opportunity to work with you. And I wanted just one final comment from you that we can all go back to work or wherever we have to go this afternoon thinking about sexuality, what would that be, Joan?
Our sexual pleasure is ours lifelong. There is no expiration date on sexuality. We need to celebrate our body's capacity for such amazing pleasure. And if there's something interfering with us experiencing that pleasure, for every problem there is a solution. With the right resources, a sense of creativity and exploration, and a sense of humor.
Joan Price, it's been an absolute pleasure. Everybody, put your hands together
Thank you.
for Joan Price.
Thank you.